If you want a copy of my book, The Speculator's Mosaic, you can find that on Amazon. I hope that you enjoy our videos, and please press like, it'll help us a lot. I have for considerable time been concerned about how the current low interest rates, pretty much around the world, cannot continue to stay as low, but should be rising. And if there's one country that is the most vulnerable to a rise in interest rates, I think it has to be Japan. Why is that? Well, because for so many years, Japan had not only not high inflation, but no inflation at all, or even deflation. And of course, that kept their interest rates very low, and they used those low interest rates to borrow enormous sums of money by the national government and pay very little because the interest rates were so low. Less than 1% for the 10-year Japanese government bond, or so-called the JGB. And by contrast, in the last couple of years, inflation, even in low inflation Japan, has started to surge. The last numbers I've seen are that inflation in Japan is more than 3%. Meanwhile, even though the 10-year bond interest rate has moved up to, I believe, 1.7, 1.8%. Those interest rates are still dramatically lower than the rate of inflation, and I think it's quite reasonable to expect not only a 2, but a 3% interest for those 10-year JGB bonds. And therefore, if you would consider what I would also consider, you might consider shorting the JGB future, the 10-year Japanese bond future, and I hope you will do well. It has moved in that direction. We now have in that interest rate the highest level, as I said, 1.7, 1.8%. Those are the highest we've seen in quite a while. And you may recall back in the old days, before this low inflation rate era that we've been coming out of, which really so pushed in by the aftermath of the 2008 subprime mortgage crime, when the Federal Reserve started printing enormous amounts of money, that situation is moving the other way. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see, long term anyway, an interest rate on the JGB of more than 3%, even more. And so therefore, don't think that the rise in interest rates in Japan is over. A final matter I should mention is what's called the carry trade, where because interest rates in Japan were so low, foreign investors would buy those bonds because the interest rate would be so low, and then switch the money that they borrowed to other investments elsewhere, where interest rates, for example, in the United States, the U.S. Treasury bond interest rates were so much higher than those in Japan that you could make a spread by arbitraging that difference. And that's now changing. People who have that carry trade are panicking by what the higher interest rates in Japan mean, and so that would be another factor that could push interest rates in Japan and therefore the price of the JGB lower to a considerable interest as well, and so therefore consider shorting the JGB. It's important that you all should know I make no claims to be something that what my advice is going to be worth anything. Anyone should do their own work, and I also have had history since 1975, a number of major mistakes as a result of which I've had considerable volatility in my results, and so therefore, once again, do your own work. I recently have noticed that we've had significant increase in the number of subscribers. So we want to thank you for your interest. And because there seems to be some continuing speech restrictions going on with some of the platforms, you may want to come to one of our other platforms that may have more information that we can share with you than what you're seeing now.